All right, good morning. Well, I have 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get started, I just want to take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Stacey Daniel, and I serve as the section chief for ELA and languages. And your presenters today are Karen Solis and Laura Van Camp. And you're here for a session specifically for people who wear many hats. You are in some sort of multifaceted role. And this session is really just going to give you an opportunity to explore the unpacking document, engage in some activities that will help build an understanding of the ELD standards and the language expectations. And then you'll also actually be contributing to a shared artifact that hopefully will help you facilitate your implementation of the standard course of study starting in the fall of 2022. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Karen and Laura to go ahead and start our session.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. And this is Laura Van Camp. I want to welcome you today to our Unpacking the 2022 ELD Standards session. We hope you are ready to unpack the new standards with us and learn how to use these wonderful documents while implementing the new ELD standards this coming year. So for just a little bit of more of an introduction, I'd like for Karen to introduce herself.
Hi, I am Karen Solis, and I'm in Gaston County, where I've served elementary and middle school for 17 years, and I've been on the support team since 2010. I am so happy to be with you here today on this Friday, and it's going to be a great session.
Yes, and I'm Laura Van Camp again, and I'm the lead ESL teacher in Rutherford County. I serve 4 schools ranging from elementary to high school, and I just finished my 17th year teaching ESL. I've been on the support team since 2016, and I'm very excited to be with you here today. Now, we'd like to know who else is here, so I want you to put in the chat what you teach and where you're from, and just introduce yourself in the chat. If you're listening by phone, which I did see that, Julie said she's listening by phone. We will do everything we can to make this engaging where you can get as much as you can while you're driving today. Thank you for joining us like that. That's dedication right there. Okay, we've got an instructional director with NC Virtual. Welcome. We have a director of federal programs, Shelby Hunt, elementary principal from Granville County, exceptional children ESL support team member, Clay County, assistant principal. I'm not sure how to say your name, Lashekia.
Shika.
If you want to unmute and
Lashikia.
Awesome. Welcome.
Lashekia. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Diana from HCMS, a dual language program teacher. Okay, we've got a bilingual instructional coach from Winston-Salem, Betsy Roman. I recognize that name. All right, we've got an instructional facilitator, and I recognize your name. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. Miss Rosario.
Ibelis. Ibelis Rosario.
Ibelis.
Again, Laura.
Hi, good to see you. A lot of these names I recognize. Amanda is a PSYOP coach. Yay, for middle and high school. Welcome. We have Carlos, an ESL teacher from Duplin. No, it's not a problem. No apologies. We know that some people have different things going on, and anyone is welcome to join any of our sessions, so that's totally fine. We've got Rachel is an ESL teacher from Charlotte Meck. Welcome. All right, and we've got a little bit smaller group today, which is great. We can have a lot more interaction. Sashi, welcome.
Hi, Sashi.
From Durham.
Yes.
Thank you, Sashi. So we're excited that you're here today, and we'd like to remind you that The conference has a Twitter hashtag that you can use. It's NCELD22. And one other little side note, most of you probably already know this, but we are changing our ELs to MLs to reflect WIDA's changes from English learners to multilingual learners. So we'll be referring to MLs quite a bit through the presentation. We might slip and say EL, but ML is something that we're going to start working on using. Mandy is here from Pine Springs Prep in Holly Springs. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you're here. And now we're going to do a little Webex overview. Some of you may not be familiar with Webex. There are a few different features. It's a lot like Zoom, but if you don't use it on a regular basis, sometimes you have to sort of find things. But in the lower left-hand corner, you can find the meeting details. In the middle, right under this lovely lady's face, you'll see the meeting controls. Make sure you can find the unmute there, because we do want to hear your voices. We want to invite you to discuss things with us, share your ideas, your thoughts, and concerns. So make sure you can find your unmute there. So you'll have that option. During the time that we're presenting, just everyone probably knows this, but just keep yourself muted so we don't have any background noise and things like that. Also on Webex, you can change video layout and the view to customize that as you like. And hopefully this will allow you to participate with us more actively so we can gain as much as you can from today's training. And I know that Stacy pointed this out earlier, but as we look at our conference notebook here, you're going to want to have a couple tabs open. So your link to the slides is in the slide deck. It's the tiny URL, and you can get the slides open. And then also you'll want to open up your conference notebook. Hopefully everyone has been to another session this week where you've accessed this wonderful resource. This is the first time that we've had a digital notebook like this, and DPI has spent a lot of time on creating a very beautiful way for us to keep track of all of our thoughts and artifacts that you're going to be using this week. So if you've already created one by making a copy of this, just keep using that same one. If you haven't made one yet, you just click on the link that best suits you. So maybe multifaceted roles or ESL teachers, and then you make a copy of it, and you can keep that up on another tab or on another screen. All right, so, and Stacy is putting those links for those things in the chat as we speak. All right, and next what we would like to do is kind of do a little pulse check and see how all of you are feeling with the new ELD standards framework. So in just a minute, you're going to see a poll open up on your screen on the right side, and it says, how familiar are you with the new ELD standards framework? So we've got options from 0 to 5. 0 means it's completely new to me. And then 5 being, I eat, sleep, and breathe this standards framework. So somewhere in there, kind of plot yourself with a number, and then click on submit, and we'll have some results come up on the screen. If for some reason you're not able to do that, in the chat, if you can just put a number that corresponds to how you're feeling between 0 and 5, that will be great, and we can take a look at that in just a minute. If you're listening by phone and you can unmute, you can just tell us what number. However we can get your information.
We've just got about maybe a third of people who are still in the process of answering the poll.
Sounds good. All right, the poll is ended, and now we can see our results in just a second. Webex does a nice job with polling. I really like it. Okay, the results have come in. We've got 30% that are at, I see what that is. 30% haven't been able to answer, and I understand you probably are juggling several things this morning. Of the folks that had a chance, most people are at a 2, and the 2 means I've looked at it, but I haven't dug into it. That is our number one choice all week long, every single day. We've had most people at a 2, and that's fine. 20% are at a 4, which means they've attended other PD on the standards framework. I know DPI offered that training back a while ago, and I also attended that, which helped me too. 10% for a number 1 and 10% for a number 3. And we've got 3% at a 0. So no matter where you are at on this range, on this scale, you're going to walk away today with further and deeper understanding of how the unpacking documents can help teachers to be able to target specific skills to help their students to grow and succeed. Thank you for taking part in that. And now I'd like to turn it over to Karen to talk to us about our objectives today.
I think you may be on mute, Karen.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Laura. So first, I would like to point out the QR code in the top right corner. If you've not accessed the copy of the slide deck already, you're welcome to scan the QR code, and that will also allow you to access the slide deck. So our first objective today that we want to accomplish is to become acquainted with the purpose, format, contents, and location of the ELD packing documents, Unpacking. And we want to give you some ideas for how to use this resource in support of the implementation of the new standards. Additionally, we would like to be able to reflect on practices in the ML or ESL classroom and our instruction. And also, we're going to promote research-based standards-aligned practices, which is critical to promote student achievement. And then we're going to create an artifact that will promote future application of this material in such a way that when you come back to school in the fall, or when you're in the fall reviewing this material, you'll be able to say, oh yes, I remember this. Okay, so let's move right along. And we are going to unpack our first suitcase, which is to become acquainted with the purpose, format, contents, and location of the unpacking document. On March 4th of 2021, the State Board of Education unanimously approved the 2020 edition of the WEDL English Language Development Standards as North Carolina's ELD standard course of study. To successfully implement these standards, NCDPI has created this unpacking document to deepen the understanding of the standards and show how content and language can be learned together. The purpose of these documents is to increase student achievement by providing access to rich standard-based grade-level content by ensuring all educators have a clear understanding of the expectations of the adopted standards. So the contents of these standards include the ELD standards, language expectations, clarifications, unpacked language functions, in the classroom ideas, which are like my favorite, and then sample language objectives that teachers can use and modify for their own instruction. First, let's set the stage. We have 5 standards: the social instructional language, which in our standards is SI, and we have the language of language arts, language of math, language of science, and language of social studies that we focus on for English language development. Our language expectations are our goals for content-driven language learning. So let's unpack the format. The ELD stands for English Language Development. LA here refers to the language of language arts. The grade span is 6-8, and the key language use is narrate. Then the mode is interpretive, and we'll go into that more in depth later. Here we have our key language uses: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. So in all of our unpacking, we are going to be using these language uses to unpack the standards and be able to integrate that content language. To locate this resource, you can always Google NCDPI ELD Resource Hub or bookmark this. And you may want to add this link to your conference notebook if you haven't had a chance to already. So Laura, let's talk about taking a tour.
Yes, we want to take you on a tour of the format of our unpacking document. So probably in the past, you've been able to use unpacking to help you kind of clarify and figure out how you can apply the standard to classroom situations. Well, in this unpacking document, I think they've done a great job of really expanding the understanding of how to apply that in these classroom scenarios. And of course, these classroom scenarios that we're going to look at are not everything that you can do. That's just one idea, and there's endless ideas. But I think that all of us who were a part of that really tried to think about the ELD standard along with the content standard of that particular grade level, along with the content area. So it's got language, it's got content intertwined, which is what ESL is all about. I'm sure I can get an amen from our ESL instructional coaches out there. So anyway, at the very top, you'll see the ELD standard that this particular example is talking about. So we're in the 4th one, language of science. So for those who may not be as familiar, your first standard is social and instructional language. And then you have the language of language arts. And then you've got the language of, and I may not be doing these in order, the language of social studies, and the language of science, and then the language of math. So this is the language of science. We're honing in on particularly the context of a science classroom or a science context. And then below that, you'll see the box that's bordered in the darker teal, the language expectation. And for the first time, we've got a standard nomenclature that looks very much like our colleagues on the content area side. And what that stands for is probably you already know, but I'll just go over it. English language development, the SC is science, the K is kindergarten. The key language use there is inform. Remember, there were 4 of those: narrate, argue, explain, and inform. This one is inform. And then interpretive is the mode of communication. So there's interpretive, where they're taking things in. That's usually by listening and reading. And then expressive, where they're telling us what they've learned through usually speaking and writing. So that's kind of what that means. And getting that nailed down is very important for you to be able to do, to share with your teams, to share with your teachers. and share with the people that you're interacting with each and every day. And so this standard is talking about interpreting scientific informational text. So the two bullets below that are clarified further in the teal boxes on the left. So where it says skills and clarification, the first bullet is broken down. That is clarified and unpacked. And then directly below that, the second bullet is also clarified and broken down even further. And then if you look to the right, the classroom scenario is bordered in gold. So this is how someone could apply this in the classroom, just an idea or a sample. Below that in the purple box is a sample language objective that goes along with that classroom idea. So hopefully this will give teachers sort of a jump start on how to think through applying those standards, because sometimes I know for me, when I looked at the standard, I thought, what does that really mean? What does that really look like? Well, now teachers will be able to say, this is an idea, that, oh, I get it. Now I'm going to use this instead of looking at animal coverings for kindergarten. I'm going to change this for fourth grade to, whatever their science content is there. Maybe it's the solar system. I've got solar system on my mind lately. But anyway, this is the way that the unpacking document is formatted. If you have any questions, I see one question in the chat. ELD Standard 4, language of or for science. It's the language of science. Yes.
Can I just say, I see the confusion because when I went back to the slide from WIDA on our ELD standards framework, WIDA has put in language for language arts. And that's so interesting. Just a semantic difference, but that was good noticing that. Had not noticed that before, but yes, we always refer to it as the language of.
Thank you. All right. And please give us those comments in the chat. We are trying our best to look at those and catch it in real time, because, you need to know that right then, not 10 minutes from now. So we're trying to be aware of that. All right. So with that, we're going to take a little deeper look in a different angle. Because you're multifaceted people, we're taking you on a multifaceted journey here today. So one angle to look at breaking down the unpacking is a strategy that we like to call number the skills. And this is simple. It's not rocket science, but it is powerful, because it's a way that you can break this down so that you can be more effective in putting forth the skills that the teacher is going to need to know. And the teachers can be able to break down any standard and say to themselves, what is it that I need to do to apply this to my instruction? So to start, you choose your standard, of course, and you read its clarifications. So I'll do that first. This standard is for science. The grade span is second and third. And then we are in the key use of explaining, and the mode of communication is expressive. So that right there, if you just stop right there, and that's a little bite-sized piece. So you're thinking to yourself, my second and third grade students, we're using a science context. The students are going to need to explain something, and they're going to need to express it in probably speaking or writing, okay? So you calibrate your brain to that. You got that. Next, we're going to highlight and number the skills. So the first skill that is listed is construct a scientific explanation. So in order for students to explain something, they're going to have to do these other two skills. Skill number 2, describe observations. So that means somewhere in your lesson, they're going to be observing something. Skill number 3, they're going to describe data about that phenomenon. So a phenomenon, that word kind of scared me a little bit when I first saw it, but basically that means something that's happening that is in the science world. So it could be photosynthesis, it could be pH changing, it could be, you know, how the phases of the moon are happening, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at, those 3 skills. Now, if we drop down to the next section, actually what's next in my notes here, I'm going to try to stick to these notes because it helps to do it just right. So right here, we've shown you that we've highlighted and we've numbered. You could also underline or circle to do the same thing, or you can make a little list on a sticky note. It's however, and Stacy is annotating right now. Thank you. Beautiful. So whatever way makes sense to your brain is definitely what we want you to do. So you're going to identify those skills. And then the next part is you're going to figure out how you will determine mastery or student understanding for the skills you've identified. In this particular example, you can see that the sample language objective, of course, matches the language expectation perfectly. So I'll explain that. I'm going to read the in the class scenario so this sort of makes sense. And I've got people listening on the phone, so I want to make sure that they, they're not able to read the screen. So I want to read this out loud. Students explore sound with a partner by taking turns and charting whether a vocal sound is high or low, which is pitch, or loud or soft, which is volume. Okay, so taken directly from the science standards. Students then use sound vocabulary to explain to their partner, that sound waves are collected by the outer ear, vibrate in the eardrum, cause the tiny bones in the middle ear to vibrate, and then move through the bones in the inner ear where sounds are understood by the brain. Students may draw a label diagram of the ear as well. So if we go back up to our skills, they're explaining something to their partner. They're explaining pitch and they're explaining volume. All right, so that hits skill 1. The second thing they're doing, describing observations. What are they observing here? They are observing the charting of this vocal sound, the pitch and the volume. So they're charting, so they're going to have an anchor chart in front of them. That's observations. And number 3, the data, that's our label diagram. So all 3 of those fit perfectly with the classroom scenario and our simple language objective. Look at this. The objective says, students will be able to describe data from observations about a phenomenon by charting pitch and volume of vocal sounds, drawing a label diagram of the ear, as well as explaining to their partners how the sound moves through the ear and is understood by the brain. So it hits everything, every single piece perfectly. All right, so that's a great example of how to number those skills. So I would like to take you to the next piece of this, and it's called Your Turn. I want you to take a look at another standard, and I want you to do exactly what I did. I'm going to give you a moment to read the standard, skills, and classroom scenario and objective. I want you to read that to yourself.
There's a question in the chat. Is this a grade 4 standard? No, it's listed right there after ELD social studies. It's a grade 1 standard. Good question.
Absolutely. And for the benefit of those on the phone, I wouldn't normally have you read it aloud and then me read it, but I want my on the phone listeners to hear this. So ELD, Social Studies, Grade 1, Argue, Interpretive. So the skill here, or the key language use, is to argue. So they're going to have to be able to talk about something, the pros and cons of something, and it's interpretive. So most of the time you're going to have the students be listening and reading. All right, so the expectation is to interpret social studies arguments. That's our first skill. Yes, you're going to be highlighting the skills and how many skills should be taught. And I'm going to give everyone a moment to think about that. I don't want to go too fast here. So for yourself, highlight what skills and how many skills should be taught. Just drop it in the chat. Tell me what skills and how many skills should be taught for this particular standard. The standard reads, interpret social studies arguments by identifying topic. Hint, hint, there's no mystery here. Thank you, Diana. You interpret, that's the first skill. You interpret social studies arguments. All right, what's our second skill? Identifying topic. Thank you, great job. All right, so this one is not too hard to figure out, but you have to, as a teacher, be able to look at that and say, okay, these are the two things I need to do with this particular standard. And then next, I want you to figure out how you will determine mastery for the skills that you've identified. The clarification for the benefit of you on the phone. Clarification is students identify the topic of a social studies argument, the unpacked set language functions. Of course, they're going to define what is a topic and what is a social studies argument. What is the topic of that argument? So the scenario reads, the teacher shows students a picture of cars in long lines waiting for a turn at the pump, a gas pump. Using the picture, so they're going to be looking at this visual of this at the pump. They're going to be guided through by the teacher through a see, think, wonder routine. Students name things they see as the teacher scribes on chart paper. Okay, remember this is first grade. Small groups then think about how that shows the topic of limited resources and the demand for that resource. Students then generate possible titles for a social studies argument related to limited resources and scarcity. So maybe a sample title might be How Panic Buying Creates Scarcity. Okay, and I always think to myself about 2020 and the race to get more toilet paper. But in this particular example, it's how, the limited gas will create the scarcity. The teacher records the students' responses on the chart paper. After the discussion, the class votes on a topic title for the argument regarding limited resources and scarcity. Students add to the wonder column in a subsequent activity. Okay, and then the language objective is students will be able to identify the topic of a social studies argument, writing the title with generalized nouns in small groups and supported by a picture and a see, think, wonder routine. All right, so how do we figure out in this example how to measure student understanding? All right, and as you see that's underlined, you can drop that in the chat for us. Or if you want to unmute, I'll give someone a moment to tell us how do we define mastery or student understanding for our skills. I'd love to hear your voices. Someone wants to explain that. There's a question in the chat here. So students will have to be able to define or understand what an argument is, as well as what a topic is. Thank you for bringing that out. Yes, if you look at that unpack language function, they have to be able to identify the topic of a social studies argument, and they define what a topic is. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. All right, Diana's saying by naming things they see, generating titles for a social studies argument, and in the discussion. Well done. All right, perfect. Thank you. And I know Stacy's annotating is definitely helping us to see those. And so the teacher is recording those responses. Absolutely. So there's a lot of things going on here. And this classroom scenario fits with this beautifully. Thank you. And now we'd like to go to our next strategy. We call this the best fit. And we're going to slow down the process just a little bit. We're going to look at this in a different angle. And when I read this aloud, read this standard aloud, I'm going to ask you to think, what do you notice and what do you wonder? That's all you have to think about right now. What do you notice and what do you wonder? And I want you to tell us by unmuting or putting in the chat what you notice or what you wonder. All right. So this standard is for social studies, grade 4 through 5. Key use is explain, and the mode of communication is interpretive. Interpret social studies explanations by determining different opinions in sources for answering compelling and supporting questions about phenomena or events. All right, so to break that down a little further, clarification is students identify various opinions expressed in a variety of sources for answering compelling and supporting questions about phenomena or events. So we'll have to define these terms: opinions, compelling questions, supporting questions, phenomena, and they'll have to figure out different opinions in different sources for answering those compelling questions about the phenomena or events. Okay, now I'm going to read the classroom scenario. Students listen to a read aloud of 3 different sources regarding the decline of the furniture industry in North Carolina. Number 1, here's the 3 sources. Number 1, a newspaper article on furniture plant closings. Number 2, a letter to the editor from an unemployed furniture worker. So that's definitely a different point of view. Number 3, an online interview with a legislator serving the area with closed down furniture plants. Yet another point of view. Students listen in order to answer the compelling question. Here it is. What factors led to the decline of the furniture industry in North Carolina? The teacher guides the class in identifying the opinion in the newspaper article, using the document camera and highlighting while thinking aloud. That's a great way to do it. Students form small groups and identify opinions in either the letter to the editor or the online interview, highlighting sentences that support opinions and referring to the anchor chart as needed. All right, so as Stacy has underlined here, we're looking at what skills the standard is asking us to do. So now what I would like you to do is either unmute, tell me what you notice, and tell me what you wonder, or drop that into the chat. Yes, Shannon was saying it would be good to add point of view to the defined terms. Yes, you're going to be able to make your own notes out to the side for this. I think when I get my paper copy of this, I'm going to probably have notes all over it That's a great thing to bring out. Thank you.
I think at the beginning too, we said this is not an exhaustive resource, or it doesn't have every detail in it. It's just a starting point for
That's
teachers to
right.
be able to use for their lessons.
Yes, and Stacy has already underlined and numbered the skills. This is
And
great.
I love what Shannon commented about, that if a student's at a lower ELD level, maybe sorting visuals into important to the topic or not, a way to differentiate for those newcomers. Absolutely. That's a great example of how we want to make sure that all students are able to be engaged and differentiated for, so that their understanding and level of content knowledge will be improved. Great comment.
Okay, does anyone want to unmute and tell us what you notice or what you wonder about this particular standard or classroom scenario? Giving appropriate wait time. All right, Shannon's saying, I wonder if/how teachers will address outsourcing and moving aspects of the furniture industry to Mexico. Right, so those things that where you can extend it and where you can include other facets, that's a great wonder. Anyone else?
I agree.
Diane.
Diana's
Yeah.
saying that it's connected to real life events, and I love that this is North Carolina. That's one of the things about fourth grade curriculum I love, is how it is connected to our state. And so great comment.
Yes, I mean, and that just made me think about, connecting that to our economy. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to the next little piece of the best fit. And that is, we want you to think about the classroom idea a little more deeply and tell us, where do you think this fits into a lesson? Would it be good to do this at the introduction of a lesson? Would it be direct instruction or modeling, guided practice, independent practice, or closure? Where do you see this piece fitting in to a lesson? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to just read Rachel's comment. I wonder how well the ELD standards line up with the North Carolina content standards. Was this classroom idea pulled directly from one of the unpacked documents we have with the content standards? Thank you for asking that. The answer is yes, it is aligned. What we did, I know Karen and I both contributed to the unpacking document, and they do align very well, as Stacy's saying. We worked with our social studies team at DPI to ensure that. And I know for myself, I worked on the kindergarten document. I had the content standards pulled up side by side to make sure that I was talking about science content that was appropriate for kindergarten. So thank you for pointing that out.
I'd like to add, Laura, that when I was working on the middle and the high school, we tried to give different examples, different classroom examples. So it is the contents aligned, but we did try to give some similar but not the same examples for the classroom scenarios, because that just gives teachers even more pictures to see how to unpack and be able to use these standards in their classrooms. Great question.
And as Stacy is saying, we worked with the ELA science and math teams at DPI as well. And, as ESL teachers, we've got different strategies, different techniques, different things that we use. And I think we've blended some of those pieces in as well that are going to be a little bit different flavor from our content area experts and colleagues. And I think that also gives the ELD standards a little bit more personality and flavor as well. And Stacy's saying content and language educators in the field also provided feedback. And Sashi happened to be one of those. Thank you very much for that. So I know that it went through a lot of review from different groups, and we wanted it to be the best possible resource we could make it be. And I know that was what DPI's intent was. All right, so where do you think it fit? You think this example would be an introduction, direct instruction, guided practice, independent practice, or closure? Anyone want to comment on that? Okay, we've got guided practice. Absolutely. Where else? There could be several answers. Okay, when it fit in all areas of the instruction, whole group, scaffolding to help students work independently, or a closure? Absolutely. You can put this in different places. When I first read it, I think that I would lean more towards the direct instruction or guided, but I could see this being, definitely tweaked to fit different areas. Anybody else? All right, that is okay. I'm sure a lot of people are juggling some things this morning. Our particular group here, I'm sure that wearing many hats, I understand. All right, and now we want to ask another question. What instruction might need to happen before or after this? Oh, that's okay, Kelly. I'm sorry you're losing connection. That's tough. So the question is, what instruction might need to happen before or after this sample language scenario? You can unmute and tell us too. We'd love to hear your voices. All right, Karen, I'm going to pick your brain. Where do you think it might fit? Or actually, what instruction needs to happen before or after? Yes, they are good interview questions. You're right.
Okay, so I was looking ahead in the presentation, so I'm sorry. But we're looking at where should this fit in the social studies ELD lesson, correct?
We did look at that just a moment ago. Now we are trying to figure out where this particular scenario, what instruction might need to happen before or after.
Well, you're going to want to define terms before you're going into the instruction.
That's right. And maybe paint that background with some background knowledge on what is a decline of a furniture industry. And also, as Stacy is pointing out, define what an opinion, define terms, provide background knowledge. Oh, that's so fun, Stacy. I love how you're using the different colors. Modeling, yes. So I think it would be a great idea for teachers to think to themselves, what would make sense to my particular group? Maybe I would pull out some pictures of these big, huge plants. I know in Rutherford County, we have a Broyhill plant that closed down. We have other textiles plants. And so our students would be extremely familiar with these huge, you drive by on the highway and see these huge buildings that nobody works at anymore. That would be a great place to jump off there.
I also like this, what a letter format should be, and that also you would want to have register. So what audience you're speaking to, how would you speak to that audience in a letter, and what academic words and language you would want to use. And someone
Yeah.
said students know what kind of moves writers use to support opinions or create compelling arguments. Very good. Yes. Visuals. Yes. Videos.
Model of a letter to the editor.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Yeah.
You know, what does it mean when a plant closes? And why is it called a plant? There is so much.
That's a good point.
I know these multiple meaning words. You could just go off of this for quite some time. Also, making sure students understand the difference between opinion and fact. That's exactly right. And those language functions right there that are unpacked, that's why that's there. Also, Stacy's annotating the classroom scenario. Teach the format of that letter to the editor, just like you said. Awesome. And you're going to know, the teacher, I'm going to say, because some of you are administrators, your teachers are going to know what that 4th and 5th grade group knows and what they don't know. And it would be fantastic to do a pre-assessment or a formative assessment before this is even started, so that, and maybe even writing visuals, posting visuals of what these things mean, so that the kids have that picture in the back of their mind. Yes, this is great. It's a great opportunity to get back to the field trips and guest speakers and experiential learning. Wow, I love that. That is awesome.
And even
All
virtual
right.
field trips, some of our funding and our ability to go places is still so limited, but being able to access virtual field trips would allow that experience as best as possible when we're not able to otherwise.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay, well, we're going to let you think about another standard. And for the benefit of those that are on the phone, I'm going to go ahead and read this. Read it with me. This is the ELD standard for social and instructional language. That's what the SI stands for. The grades are grades 4 to 12, and our key language use is argue. And someone pointed out this week that you don't see a mode of expression here. It's because it's that social and instructional standard. So that little piece is not there, but that's okay. We still get the understanding that we're teaching kids how to argue in the classroom. And the bullet there underneath there is generate questions about different perspectives. Wow, we could go a lot of places with that. The clarification is students identify various opinions expressed in a variety of sources for answering compelling and supporting questions about phenomena or events. Sounds just like the other standard we read a few minutes ago. The unpack language functions we're defining what is an opinion, compelling questions, supporting questions, phenomena. How do we determine different opinions in answering those compelling questions? All right. On the right, we've got our in the classroom idea. Students brainstorm a class list of different perspectives on a particular topic. All right. After brainstorming, students choose 2 of these perspectives to explore, developing questions about them. Students develop questions like, I understand the perspective of blank. Have we considered blank? Or how is blank different from blank? Great sentence frames. Or what would it look like if blank? Or how did blank decide blank? So providing those sentence frames is essential for a lot of our ESL students, or multilingual learners, to be able to perform these tasks and generate these questions. So I would say that this definitely would fit into a lesson in a particular spot. Tell me what you think. Do you think it goes in the introduction, direct instruction or modeling, guided practice, independent practice, or closure? What do you think? Either unmute or drop it in the chat for us. Okay, Dia is saying independent practice. All right, so that means that a good chunk of the lesson would have to be done before this. All right, I've got introduction from Shannon. Okay, that might be a hook. Okay, it might be a hook, and then we'll have to go back and make sure that we're painting in the different facets of it. Okay. All right, we've got independent practice from Kelly. How could that be independent practice? Well, you've taught the lesson, and now they have the tools that they need. They've got those sentence frames, and now they're going to be able to generate those questions. I could see that for sure. Guided practice. Yes, the teacher might use this to help take them by the hand and help them to be successful with a graphic organizer, with visuals, with different scaffolds. Yes. All right. Barbara says, I agree. I would use brainstorming for intro. I could definitely see that as well. DSC says, I could see intro and independent. It would be a good hook. All right. So great ideas. Anyone else want to comment? This sentence stem is guided practice. Yes. And, I could see, I know in SciOp, we do those little table tents where you take a piece of paper and you divide it in 3 sections and fold it up and tape it. And you can have those sentence stems already written out. And I see what Stacy is annotating there. Brainstorming is definitely a great way to introduce something to students. And then the sentence stems are a great way to go through guided practice or independent practice. Great. And there are so many ways to look at this. It's like looking at a beautiful jewel, a beautiful diamond. You're going to see those different facets. The more that you turn it, you're going to see that light reflect off of that. So that's something that always is in the back of my mind when I look at something. Okay, this is the way it looks to me the first time I look at it. Now turn it this way. What does it look like now? And so that's just something that I do. And I can see different ways. Definitely. Great job, everyone. And what instruction do you think might need to happen before this or after it? So if for you it best fits in guided practice, what needs to happen before this? What needs to happen after this? You can unmute or drop that in the chat. Penny says this could be applied to multiple aspects of a lesson plan. I don't think it has to be selectively applied. I agree with you. Totally.
I do too. And one thing, Laura, that also fits here very well is this is a great scaffold for our newcomers and our lower proficient multilinguals in the classroom. So everybody's learning this academic language because we don't go around and generally speak like this with these supports that are given here. So even having this up anytime you're doing an anchor chart and having those kinds of stems up, it's going to wire the students' brains more and more to be able to effectively debate or argue as they get up into middle school and high school. Awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, look at the different scaffolds that are embedded here. I mean, you see how the brainstorming, you've got that interaction with the teacher, so that's an interactive support. You've got the sentence stems, which is what they would call in WIDA graphic support, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got the interaction. I could see where it's not written, but you could definitely have students supporting each other, where they could be in pairs or triads or small groups, and then you could add to it to scaffold it even more. If you had visuals, different perspectives is a very broad term. If you wanted to narrow it down to something particular, but think about what language standard we're talking about, social and instructional. What would be a social context that this would work for? And this is just something I'm thinking of right now. What would be a social context? Could it be where you could bring up a scenario to students at school? Like when you're on the bus or if you're going to the lunchroom, you know, how could you look at something from a different perspective? If you're in the classroom and, you see something differently than someone else, what could that be? That could be more brainstorming and just getting them into that groove of that social and instructional language.
One
So
thing
that
that
would,
we always talk about is uniforms. Should students wear or not wear uniforms? And because of a lot of students in other countries do wear uniforms, or coming from charter schools, or just the transitory populations that we have, is a hot topic. And
yeah,
they all have opinions, and then learning to respect each other's opinion, and then having to debate on the other side of that opinion it's very, I I just always have fun with that because they're really passionate about it.
yes. And I actually served a year-round school where they had uniforms. It was a transformational strategy, one of three. The principal was amazing. He did uniforms and he did an after-school program and he did, it just left my brain. Um, oh, it'll come back to me. But anyway, the uniforms, it was a low wealth school and the uniforms really did help to unify the student body. And it was just a really good, that would be an interesting topic to do this with, definitely. Um, Shannon's saying instruction before might include reading a short piece that expresses an opinion on a compelling topic. Then the teacher could work with students to develop questions they would ask the author. For independent practice, they could be given a new piece that the class will use for a Socratic seminar. Yeah, that would be fun. So students can have a chance to use their questions in an authentic context. Wow,
Hmm.
nice.
Definitely.
Yes, that would be so great. I respectfully disagree with you, you know, while I respect your opinion, that kind of thing. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. And with that, I am going to ask Karen to talk to us more about modes of communication.
Thank you, Laura. Within each standard, there are both interpretive and expressive modes of communication, and they're noted in the standards after the language function. So, interpretive is a receptive type mode where you've got listening, reading, and viewing, and the expressive mode is speaking, writing, and representing has been added. As you read over these objectives here, I'd like to add that from WIDA, they've given us some FAQs that say these communication modes highlight that students communicate through listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but they also communicate through gestures, facial expressions, images, equations, maps, symbols, and other means. So, multimodal communication does not only provide support for developing language, it's an essential path for all students to make meaning. Using interpretive and expressive communication modes also reminds us that students must be offered multiple means to engage, interpret, represent, act, and express their ideas in the classroom. So, looking at strategy number 3, and we are going to be coming back to these strategies for your artifact. So, just to give you a heads up about that. When we're looking at this grade 4 and 5 language arts example, note what kind of verbs are used in the interpretive objectives. And you can drop those in the chat. again, what kind of verbs are used in the interpretive objectives? So on the left side of your screen in the purpley pink, we've got an ELD language arts 4th and 5th grade example for argue, and it's interpretive. And our verbs are to identify and analyze and evaluate. Yes. And now let's look over and see what kind of verbs are used in our expressive objectives. Thank you. All right, we've got this same ELD language arts 4th and 5th grade example for argue, but now we're looking at the expressive side of the objective. They're going to construct language arts arguments that introduce, support, use a formal size, and logically connect opinions. So on the interpretive side, they're interpreting language arts, and on the right side in the expressive, they're constructing the language arts. So how are they similar? How are these two similar? And of course, you can always feel free to unmute or type in the chat. How are they similar?
And I like how Stacy is annotating the different verbs there for us to be able to compare those. That's a great scaffold even for us as adults.
Yes. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy.
So both of these two, I'm gonna keep us rolling here. I know you're busy thinking about how these are alike, the same topics. It's the same grade levels, but we're looking at the difference between taking in the content and producing the language. So they're similar in that the beginning part of the objectives are the same, but they're different because one's taking in and one's producing, right? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to another example. Or actually, we're going to go, and it's different depths of knowledge. I wanted to say that as well. So you're thinking about blooms. You're also getting all those wonderful different levels of depths of knowledge there with it as well.
And also, I'd like to add to that, Karen, that the students are taking in and expressing, all throughout the lesson. And so one moment they're identifying something, they have to identify something before they can develop and state an opinion, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to analyze something before they can support their opinion. So it all goes hand in hand where that interpretive and expressive just kind of ebb and flow with each other.
It's that whole cycle of literacy, that speaking, listening, reading, writing. It's like reading and writing. You get better readers with better writers, and you get better writers with better readers. And the more that they do, the better they become. So absolutely. Yes, Beth, thank you. It is a cycle. Awesome. Okay, let's move on forward to a your turn example. So looking at this math expectation for grades 6 to 8, we've got what kinds of verbs are used in the interpretive objectives? And then what are the verbs used in the expressive objectives? We're just taking a close-up look at what we're actually looking for and comparing these two different modes, the interpretive mode and the expressive mode, to see how teachers are going to be reading these and then unpacking them for their lessons in the fall. What kinds of activities and instruction are they going to have to do? They're going to be asking their students to identify, analyze, evaluate. Very good. Yes. And then On the expressive side, they're going to be, they have introduce and share, describe, and state. And that word state, it just takes me back to social instructional language. One thing that I don't know if we mentioned it here, social instructional includes all the language in your EOGs or your EOCs. And a lot of students think of state like we're in the state of North Carolina, or solid, liquid, gas are states, right? But now we've got state reasoning. So it's so important, and that's one of the things we do with our multilinguals is work on those, that social instructional language for directions and for questions and in this kind of scenario as well. Okay, and
And
construct.
Karen,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to add to that too. I think a lot of our math teachers are surprised at, when they think about the different vocabulary, the language of math, because you're thinking, I'm the opposite of language, I'm math, but there is language. I mean, as you can see right here, solution. Yeah, you see that in science, but it's totally different in math. And I think all that vocabulary and all of the just the construct and the context of everything in math kind of leads people to not really get into the math vocabulary, but it is essential for the students to be able to um, succeed on EOGs and everything else. So I'm glad this math example was shared.
Thank you. And then how are they alike, and how are similar, and how are they different? I think some of you have pointed that out, that it is like a cycle. And you're receiving and you're expressing. So you've got that back and forth for these standards. Anybody want to make any share any wows or wonders for looking at the different modes and how it might impact instruction or takeaways? Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute. We've got a small group today, or share in the chat box when you're thinking about modalities.
I know while maybe somebody else is getting ready to share, I'll share. This is the 4th day that we've done this, and I learned something every single day. The word interpretive kind of was scary to me. I didn't understand that word, but now I'm finally getting it. So when you look at something, a piece of art, for example, you're trying to interpret that. What is that? I'm looking at it. I don't understand it right now, but I'm looking deeply into it, and I'm going to pick it apart, and I'm going to figure out, what did the artist try to, what's the message, you know? And I've always said, well, it's just taking it in, interpreting it. Okay. Even when you're looking at another language and that language, but it's not your first language, you're interpreting it for your brain to understand it, don't you? So that's what we want our students to do with interpretive tasks or interpretive objectives. Expressive, to me, that word, I understand that word, but I got a little bit hung up on the interpretive, but it's getting clearer for me.
We were the same way, Laura. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so Arnolfini wedding portrait. We'll have to look that up. Thank you, Penny, for sharing that. We're going to move on to our next objective, which is going to be to talk about the artifact that you're going to create to be able to come back to this information later and have it be meaningful and relevant. So looking at, and again, there's that QR code if you need to get to the slide deck for anyone who might have come in late. We have got different grade level areas. So what I would like you to do is think about a grade area that you would like to explore. And each one of these suitcases will take you to the unpacking document for that grade level area. In just a moment, Stacy is going to kindly open up breakout rooms, and you're going to get to join a breakout room where you're going to actually look at that grade cluster. You're going to choose a slide and add your names to the top of the slide when others join your breakout room. Please, no more than 5 or so in a breakout room. It's just more effective. If you do that, you have better conversations, we have found. And then you're going to you're going to unpack with one of the strategies we've discussed here, either the number, the skills, or the best fit, or really unpacking that interpretive and expressive mode in two standards or within two language objectives to really make it meaningful and take that away. You want to share that link onto your artifact in your conference notebook so that you will be able to have that as your artifact for this learning today and as a resource that you can come back to later. So again, just as a review, you're going to think about a grade cluster level that you would like to look more at those impact standards, and you're going to choose a breakout room. And then together with your group, use one of the strategies that we shared and unpack your language expectation. We're going to allow about, Stacy, what do you think? We usually do this in 15 minutes. I think we can do it.
We can do 15, and if you guys need more time, just let us know in the chat, and of course we can extend the time.
And when you go to your breakout room, if you have any questions or need clarification, a message will pop up on your screen, to raise your hand or to let us know that you need help, and we can pop into your breakout room. So just as a reminder about your breakout rooms, where you have participants up in the right, the breakout room icon will show up, and then you can join whichever room. Now, when you do that, it will also have a number of how many people are already in there. So once you get in there, if you see that there's more than 5 or 6, please just leave that breakout room and go to another breakout room. Okay? Any questions? Okay, Stacy, I think we may be ready for our breakout sessions.
All right, the breakout rooms are now open, so you can go ahead and join the breakout room for the grade level cluster that you'd like to work in. If you're having trouble navigating to the breakout room that you want to be in, just let us know the grade level cluster that you'd like to work in the chat, and we'll go ahead and move you.
Perfect. And if you are joining us by phone, I believe those who have downloaded the Webex app are usually able to join easier. Sometimes there's a hang up otherwise, but we'll see. We'll deal with that if we come to it.
Again, if you can't find how to get into the breakout rooms, just let us know which grade span you'd like to be in, and we'll go ahead and move you. Thanks, Ashi. That's okay, Dia. Even if you just let me know in the chat which grade band you want to be in, at least you'll be able to hear the people in the breakout room. You just let us know and we'll move you over.
Rosario, did you find the breakout rooms?
And again, just if you can't find the breakout rooms, let us know what grade level cluster you'd like to join in the chat and we'll move you. For those of you who are still in the main room, if we don't hear from you, we may just put you in a random room just so you can join the conversation. No worries, Diana. I think Dia had the same issue, but she wanted to just listen in on 6-8. So if you have a preference, just let us know. Otherwise, we'll just put you in a random room. Here and Laura, just letting you know now we have everybody in breakout rooms. So I think we can do our 15 minutes from here. Is that okay?
Sure.
Absolutely. I downloaded. Hello? I have to turn it down. I downloaded Webex to see if I could join a breakout room from my phone.
Oh, I can move you in a breakout room right now on your regular account.
That's okay. I wanted to see what the participants are having a hard time with. And so I had heard that if you download Webex on your device, then you can access the breakout rooms from that point. But I'm going to have to watch a tutorial later because I'm just not seeing it. Learning the platform.
We've had this platform for like 2 years, I think now, and we're still learning how to use it.
Well, you're very proficient.
Just keep in mind too, we are recording, so we'll see which recording we want to use to post for the final archive and materials.
Okay, great.
I almost feel like yesterday's was the best, even though it was content area teachers, but I'm not sure how you all feel about that.
I loved their engagement and excitement.
Yes, I agree. Yesterday was probably my top pick.
We only have 2 in high school. Five in middle school. I'm going to jump into middle school. Let's see, where's the middle school book? Ooh.
It's about 3 more minutes.
Middle school's rocking it. They're all on it and highlighting and love it. Are you going to broadcast that, Stacy, to them that they have 3 minutes?
I already did, yeah.
Oh, you're good. Of course you did. And let's see, we have grades 4 and 5. 2 groups of grades 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at 4-5 on slide 6.
Me too.
And I'm thinking, you know, the teacher has to interact with the standard before they can really, in other words, they have to notice things, they have to wonder things, they have to see what to do before, what to do after. I mean, all of these pieces are so important to for the teacher to go through before they can even teach the lesson. I never really thought about it like that before.
Mm-hmm. It's part of a unit. I mean, it's just part of a bigger picture. But and we haven't said that in this session, and I think it needs to be said that this may not, all of this may not be seen in a 30-minute elementary lesson, because you just don't have time to unpack all of it in a lesson.
Right.
Sometimes with all the constraints that are going on. Lord knows if you have to stop and have 3 kids use the bathroom on the way to your classroom, it's a shot.
Yes, only itinerants know that little special thing.
Oh, it's so hard. I mean, you're just like every second. I had my kids when we were in the hallway, I would be doing something. I mean, we just from the second I got them, and I always carried some kind of flashcards or something in case somebody had to use the restroom, and we just had to. Yeah, and so that I was trying to maximize my time every second.
I just closed Breakout Rooms, so it's giving everybody like a 1-minute timer, and I think we have about like 40-ish seconds left.
And we have 20 minutes left in the session. Okay, good deal. Thank you, Stacy. And
So
we're
do
on
you want to,
Thousand Wonders.
Karen, do you want to just kind of kick it off with that comment that you just said?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be good.
Absolutely.
All right.
We saw a lot of engagement. Is everybody back? They close in 4 seconds. Okay, so
Yeah.
as everybody's coming back and everyone is back here now in the session, one quick comment I just wanted to say for especially our elementary folks, these objectives, sometimes not all of this is going to be seen in one 30-minute ESL or ML lesson, especially as you're having to transit to and from the classroom and gather your groups. So some of these maybe it's just part of a bigger picture of a unit, and you're unpacking parts of it as you go through. If you have kids that have to stop and use a bathroom, there goes part of your lesson. So anyway, just something else to remember as we're teaching. So share with us what are some of the wows and wonders that you took away from this? I saw a lot of active engagement going on in the 4th and 5th grade span, and also in the middle school span. Lots of things going on.
Yeah, we love to hear your voices if you want to unmute or just drop your wows and wonders in the chat. I had a wow. I realized for the first time that the teacher has to interact with the standard, noticing, wondering, thinking about before and after, where it would fit, all of those processes that the teacher goes through to make a lesson work, to make a unit work. There is a lot of brain power being released there, and through these strategies that we've shared with you, hopefully you can take this back to your teams and help them to be able to break it down into bite-sized pieces so they can be successful in implementation. Anyone else?
Beth is
Okay.
saying classroom expectations set the tone for the class and create a blueprint. I like that. Yes. Okay, I think moving right along, we're coming to the close of our session together. So we still have a few meaningful things that we want to share with you.
There is this one comment from Shannon: routines will help with the implementation of the standards. Exactly. Yes, the students know what to expect. They know what to do. We're going to jump in with these routines. Thank you for sharing that. All right, and now we're going to share with you some connections to our North Carolina ML initiatives. And as you look through these standards in the Unpacking document, you'll see that strategies are embedded in the classroom sample ideas. And we want to bring life to each standard by using brain research and all of our wonderful tools that we have in our toolkits. So first, I want Karen to go over with us some of the best practices strategies.
All right, thank you, Laura. No matter what the first language is, best practice begins with Stevens Krashen's low affective filter. That is creating a low anxiety learning environment. When you're not in fight or flight mode, the body can be receptive to learning. And when our multilinguals come into a new school, there are many phases that they go through. Initially, there may be a honeymoon period where everything is new and exciting. However, they may end up in culture shock as the classroom environment is either not quite the same as where they're from, or just that listening day after day to a new language and not understanding can be exhausting. So there is an adjustment period. However, with that warm, welcoming environment, appropriate scaffolding, and other supports, the student will be able to adapt and learn. There's much to read on this, and one of my personal favorite resources is linked here for you, the OELA EL Toolkit. That's the Office of Education for Language Acquisition, and there's wonderful, all sorts of resources for you there. They're free today. And Laura, will you share about some GLAD strategies?
Yes, I am privileged to be one of the GLAD trainers in North Carolina, and I just wanted to talk to you today about two of my favorite strategies. First of all, OCDE stands for Orange County Department of Ed in California. So these GLAD strategies, or Project GLAD strategies, were born over 30 years ago on the West Coast. There are entire schools dedicated to GLAD, and we were able to partner with OCDE. I believe it was back in 2013, somewhere in there, and bring some of that over to North Carolina. And what it stands for, GLAD stands for Guided Language Acquisition Design. And basically, it's an approach where there are over 150 strategies where the teacher can design a unit, and there are components that the strategies fit within in order to guide students through a unit to deepen their English language development. And it's integrated, so it's got a lot of spiraling vocabulary, and it's sort of one of those really great integrated unit approaches. Here are two of my favorite strategies. On the left, you'll see the learning log. This is a student example. I was teaching about healthy living, about how your heart operates and how exercise is important to staying healthy. And so this student has responded to the prompts of this T-chart. On the left, there's a text side. So after any direct teaching, let's say that you interacted with a read aloud, a lesson, an experiment, or anything that you are teaching, the students can reflect using the text side on the left. You ask students to connect to the text with specific questions such as, what did you learn about blank? And then on the right side, it's the you side. And you ask students to connect what they just learned to their own lives with a question like, how does this connect to your life? And at first, you might need to model this, but after a couple of tries, the students catch on very quickly. And this is a great 5-minute activity. And I ask my students to do a quick sketch to help me understand where they're coming from, because especially on the connect to you side, they might be connecting to something that means something to them. And sometimes a drawing will help deepen that. And then on the right side, listen and sketch is a really great strategy. You pick a text, and maybe it's a text that is different, like a poem or maybe an excerpt of a longer text or a storybook. And you're going to mark 6 stopping points ahead of time. I just use 6 little sticky notes. And then you ask the students to fold their white paper into 6 boxes and number the boxes. And on their desk, all they have is that paper and a pencil. You ask them to keep their pencil down and you start reading. And then when you stop at the stopping point, you say to the students to sketch the picture in their minds. And you give them, a minute and a half or however long you think that they need to do a quick sketch. And of course, you can model this for the first time also, but then they catch on. And then, so for box 1, 2, 3, 4, you go all the way through. And it's just amazing how well the students will listen and sketch out what they see in their mind's eye. And then you can go back around at another time and maybe extend this into writing or different things that you feel like would be appropriate to meet your objectives. I just wanted to share those 2 favorite strategies, something that maybe you can take back and use with your teams. Now, Karen, she's going to share with us some Excel strategies.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. I would just like to share 2 of my favorite, or 3 of my favorite strategies from Excel. Excel is a research-based initiative that came from DPI when we partnered with Margarita Calderon. Dr. Calderon had done research, latitudinal and longitudinal research with the Carnegie Corporation, and found research-based strategies that will increase literacy for our English learners or our MLs. And one of the first things is with vocabulary instruction and a 7-step vocabulary pre-teach, where the teacher engages into these steps with the student with new vocabulary, targeting 5 words per content area per day to catch up our multilingual learners with vocabulary to their peers. Then there's also integrated reading and writing strategies and instructional practices that will also increase literacy. I have hyperlinked here resources at the bottom of the page that Dr. Calderon shares from her website that are free for teachers to download and be able to use. And I would just love to have you look more into that at your leisure. And if there's an Excel PD that you would like to have, you can go through. Stacy is at their regional director if they want further PD from the support team or for their district to go through that channel.
Correct. I'll put the link to their contact information in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you so much. And then looking at our next slide, with what you've done today in your artifact, anything that you've learned, we would like to encourage you to share your any feedback about the section or comments with the learning that you've had today on Go Open, or even to tweet it out at hashtag NCELD 2022, as you have been able to take in today and be able to share it out with our larger community in North Carolina and beyond. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura for our last objective of the day.
Great. So the last objective we have is to reflect on your own practices. And this is vital to building and cementing your learning. And what we want to do is ask you to think about your lessons and how you apply the standards. And in the chat, summarize your learning today in 3 words. And throughout the week, we've had some great responses, and we know that you have probably had your wows and wonders in your multifaceted roles as well. And so we're going to give you a little bit of time to reflect and to put your learning into 3 words for us. If you'd like to unmute, we would love to hear from you, or put it in the chat. Okay, Penny says exposure, stimulation, ideas. Great. That's great. Stimulation, because it does make us want to go out there and look at that deeper, look at these standards deeper, see the power behind the changes and what it is that we can do to use them. All right. Ready, set, goal. That's cute, Diana. Thank you. That's right. Informative, engaging, exciting. All right. I'm like Shannon. Ideas, informing, information, prioritizing. Yes. Language, curriculum, empower. Yes. What else?
And Shannon said that thinking about more how to introduce and use these ELD standards and language expectations with classroom teachers. And what I love about this is the classroom teachers that we had yesterday, they seemed to feel so supported by seeing what our ELD standards were and how we focus on content to build language with our multilingual learners. So yes, it's a lot to think about and take in, but it's been a beautiful partnership, I think, coming out with all of this. Language
That's
is
right.
everywhere. I like that. Yes. Helps all students. Yes, it does indeed. Ideas, information, and prioritizing. Yes.
Okay. And with that, we'll move on to our next part.
Well, did we meet our objectives today as we're wrapping up? We became acquainted with the purpose, format, contents, and location. Yes. We gave ideas, we reflected, we promoted research-based practices, and you've created an artifact that will help promote future application of this material. As a reminder, Teresa Parker will be sending out certificates for this session in probably 3 or 4 weeks. You'll get that in your email, and any CEUs that you want to have, you need to be able to follow your district's process for that. And we value your feedback. Please include the title for this session in your evaluation. Again, the title was Unpacking the ELD Standards. We do read your feedback, and it does make an impact on what future professional development we are going to provide or be able to provide. We want to make it relevant and meaningful. So we just thank you in advance for your evaluation. If you would like to join us this afternoon, Laura, would you tell them how they could do that?
Sure. So our office hours are from 3:30 to 4:30 today. And join us by clicking on the link there. There's no registration. You can just click on that link, and we will be together in a room, and then we'll go to a breakout room with just Karen and me to answer any of your questions and get any clarifications, share, or just say hi. So if you'd like to do that, just come on over at 3:30.
Thank you for joining us today, and have a great weekend and a great rest of your summer. Thank you for taking time out of your day and out of your summer to spend it with us and with unpacking these standards. We really appreciate and value your time. Thank you.